My grandfather looked at me and said, "The woman who raised you was never supposed to keep you." His hands trembled as he pulled a folder from beneath his hospital bed. Machines beeped around us. He'd called me at 3 a.m. saying he needed to tell me something before it was too late. I drove 40 minutes thinking he wanted to say goodbye. Instead, he handed me a stack of yellowed papers and photographs I'd never seen. The top photo showed my mother holding a baby in front of a building I didn't recognize. She looked terrified. The building had a sign that read, "St. Catherine's Home for Unwed Mothers." I was that baby. My mother had never been married when she had me. She'd told me my father died before I was born. That was the first lie. My grandfather coughed and pointed at another photograph. It showed a young couple I'd never seen before, standing with a lawyer, signing documents. The woman was crying. The man had his hand on her shoulder. My grandfather said these were the Websters. They'd paid $15,000 in 1989 for a private adoption. They'd waited 3 years for a baby. They'd painted a nursery blue. They'd picked out a name. They were supposed to take me home on a Thursday morning. My mother was supposed to hand me over and walk away with the money, but something happened the night before. He said she ran. She took me and disappeared. The Websters spent 8 years looking for us. They hired private investigators. They filed lawsuits. They never found us because my grandmother helped my mother change our names and move across 3 states. I asked him why he was telling me this now. He pulled out a letter with a return address I didn't recognize. He said the Websters found him 6 months ago. They'd been using new DNA databases, matching records, following paper trails. They knew I was alive. They knew where I lived. They'd written to him because they didn't want to traumatize me by showing up unannounced. They wanted permission to reach out. He said he'd been ignoring their letters, but he couldn't die with this secret. He handed me the letter. It was addressed to him but mentioned me by name, my real name, the name the Websters had chosen before I was born, the name my mother erased when she ran. I read the letter 3 times. The Websters wrote that they understood my mother must have loved me to run. They wrote that they'd stopped being angry years ago. They wrote that they just wanted to know I was okay. They included a phone number. I stared at it for 10 minutes. My grandfather fell asleep. I walked to the hallway and dialed. A woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was soft and tired. I told her who I was. She started crying immediately. She said she'd dreamed about this call for 30 years. She said she'd kept my nursery exactly the same. She said she never stopped hoping. I asked her what really happened that night my mother ran. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made my blood freeze. She said my mother didn't run because she loved me. She said my mother ran because the money wasn't enough. She said my mother called her the night before the adoption and demanded an additional $20,000. When the Websters refused, my mother threatened to keep me forever out of spite. She said my mother had done this before. There were records. St. Catherine's had flagged her for a previous adoption that fell through the same way. My mother had used me as leverage twice. The Websters couldn't afford the extra money. They lost me because they couldn't be extorted. I felt sick. I asked if she had proof. She said she'd saved everything, every document, every recording, every letter my mother sent demanding more money over the years. I drove to my mother's house the next morning. She was making coffee when I walked in. I put the folder on her kitchen table. I put the letter next to it. I asked her to explain. Her face changed instantly. The warmth disappeared. Her eyes went hard. She said I had no right to dig into her past. She said what happened before I was born was none of my business. I asked about the Websters. She laughed. She said they were naive people who thought they could buy a baby for cheap. She said she was smarter than them. She said she kept me because I was worth more as a tax credit than a one-time payment. I recorded the entire conversation on my phone. She didn't notice until I put it on the table and hit play. Her face went white. I told her the Websters had contacted a lawyer. I told her the statute of limitations on fraud had never expired because she'd continued accepting money from the state for raising a child she'd stolen from a legal adoption. I told her my grandfather had agreed to testify. I told her I'd already submitted the recording to their attorney. She started screaming. She threw her coffee mug at the wall. She called me ungrateful. She said she'd given me a life. I said she'd taken one from me. She said no court would believe the Websters over a mother. I told her we'd find out. The Websters got a settlement of $180,000. My mother faces 3 felony charges. I'm meeting my real parents next month for the first time.